We have our recording rolling. Let's do the sharing and get back to this beautiful picture we were just looking at. But that's a great suggestion. I think doing some notes would be fantastic. So let's do that. Let me pass you. Go ahead and email me. Anybody who's interested in the summary of some of the things I'm going to be offering. So I'm really giving you just suggestions for different foods and supplements you can consume to help you excrete air pollutants. So if you'd like a little list of those things, I'm more than happy to give them. If you'd like a recommendation for actual supplements on a distribution site, I'm happy to pass that to you as well. Thank you for that question. Be more than happy to. Well, gosh, welcome. Welcome. This is my neck of the woods. This is where I go to commune with what I feel is as close to perfection as you can get in nature. This is Mount Shuckson. This is in my backyard. I drive to the end of the highway that we live off of called Mount Baker Highway. And when I get to the end, this is what I see. This is Picture Lake, and on a normal day, this time of year, and pretty much every weekend and a couple of times during the week, we're up here. The blueberries are just about to come in here. I'll give it another week and a half or something, and then we'll get some. There's a lot of snow this year. But we're just blown away. I mean, you go up and you just kind of go, oh, come on, right? I mean, it just envelops all your senses. You get tingling up your spine and you go, what is this, right? How could you, God is great. Nature is awesome. Whatever you want to feel. I mean, it's stunning. It's really overwhelming what it does to you and your consciousness. But at the same time, recently I just went up this last weekend. And I'm going up to do my hiking like I always do and wanted to get a little bit of running in. And this was the view of the mountain. So what happened is we have a bunch of forest fires up in BC, right? British Columbia, north of us. We're right on the Canadian border. And these forest fires are wreaking havoc. They're coming down and creating so much smoke that my eyes were watering, my throat was sore, I had a hard time talking. When I was active, I could feel burning in my lungs. It was quite significant what was going on here. So this is not something that we need to shake a stick at. This is something we need to be conscious of, that there are more and more places that are getting drier and drier, and they're getting more forest fires. If you look at charts, you can actually see over the last decade, we've had a drastic rise in the frequency, duration, and severity of forest fires. So let's get into contextual field, okay? I teach a class online called the Progressive Practitioner Coaching Program, and I really just kind of touch on the essence of life, right? We look at what is life? Why are we here? How does this whole thing work? What does the human body do? And how can we make it a blissful experience, right? So let's peek back. Let's go back and let's say, all right, here we are. We're on this third rock from the sun. It's called the Earth. And this star is not too far off, and it is beaming down all this amazing radiation. But thankfully, we have this electromagnetic field surrounding our planet, so we don't fry up, right? We only allow a certain amount of that radiation to come through, and it's just a beautiful amount to go ahead and capture some of that energy in leaves. And when we capture some of that energy up in leaves, we get this green environment, right? These are my boys up on Skyline Divide with me a couple of Father's Days ago. It was an amazing trip up here, right? And the air is so clean and there's so much green everywhere. The entirety, all the trees, the meadows, everything is just beautiful green. Well, that green is a sign that there's something going on, right? We have this incredible interaction. There's the same Mountain Shucks in there, where we take in sunshine. And as we're taking in sun's radiation energy into the chloroplast of the cell, the actual cell of the plant will stimulate the activity under its leaves to inhale through a little mouth called a stomata, inhale carbon dioxide. And when the carbon dioxide goes into that leaf, then it combines with water, so hydrogen and oxygen from the water from the roots, and it makes this incredible packet of energy called a carbohydrate. Now that carbohydrate then goes down, feeds microbes, gets eaten by other animals, does all sorts of wonderful things. But we wouldn't have life on this planet if we didn't have this incredible photosynthesis going on all the time. And it requires the sun energy, yes, and it requires this inhalation of the plant of carbon dioxide. And then the plant will exhale oxygen and water. So we have this whole thing of carbon dioxide being exchanged back and forth through the underside of a leaf. Now, the underside of the leaf, to give you an idea, it shows the carbon dioxide coming up under that leaf, is literally breathed in. You can see this little mouth on the left-hand side, this stomata, and it actually will open and close based on the need of that plant for specific energy. But it also will open and close based on what's happening in its environment. So we want that opening. We want to sequester all the carbon in our atmosphere, right? We want to get rid of some of this stuff that's causing some of the global warming. We want to regulate it. And at the same time, we want that oxygen coming out, and there will be some moisture as well. And we want that to then cause cloud formation. We want the moisture. Have you ever watched a rainforest? You know, they see those National Geographic specials, right? And mid-afternoon when it gets really hot, right? All the moisture comes up from the forest floor, and then they form these clouds and they wisp through the rainforest. And then all of a sudden there's a mid-afternoon rain. That's allowed through this stomatal behavior. Well, what the research is telling me is when the mouth of a plant comes in contact with air pollutants, it will actually change the aperture. It will change how it closes. And therefore, it'll change the water balance of the leaf and the entire plant. Now, the weird thing is they checked the pore width, so the actual stomata is closing and opening on specific plants, and they looked at sulfur dioxide and air pollutant concentrations. And you know what they found in these beautiful plants? They found that plants are like humans. When I was up in the mountain, I did not want to inhale the pollutants. I'm just trying to keep my mouth closed as much as possible, right? I don't want to suffer from that. It hurts. Same thing with the plants. When you have sulfur dioxide concentrations go up, the diameter of the stomata goes down. So that passing back and forth, carbon dioxide, oxygen, along with it some moisture, doesn't happen. So what happens is we end up with a change in the actual moisture in the air and in the plants themselves. So we have now dysfunctions in the structural cell walls of the stomata, leading to forest decline due to air pollutants and drought stress. So in essence, what I'm trying to say is, if we're not conscious of what we're doing as a species, we're going to shift what nature already has going on. And when we shift what nature has going on, is it possible then we're going to alter the self? Is it possible we're going to make our own health not as ideal as we would like? Let's examine that question. So we see, due to coal burning in China, Indonesia, we see due to all sorts of fossil fuel burning other than coal, petroleum-based byproducts, gasoline, whatnot, we see a tremendous amount of pollution happening, right? We have all these interesting particles, things like mercury, things like polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, something called benzoapyrene. We see all these substances floating around in the air. And anytime we have substances floating around the air, it's going to mean we're going to change our breathing, right? We have 10,800 cubic feet of air that comes through our lungs on a daily basis. And our lungs are supposed to process the nitrogen, the oxygen, all the beneficial things that we'd normally come in contact with. But at the same time, we're forcing our lungs to process all sorts of little compounds. And it's interesting because everybody's like, wow, thank goodness we don't have air quality of Beijing, right? Oh my gosh, if we did, we'd have the increased rates of autoimmunity, heart disease, autism that they have over there in China. We'd see that millions of people are dying every year because of air pollution. Oh, wow, thankfully, we don't have to worry about that, right? Well, goodness, are you paying attention to what CNN is tracking? Are you paying attention to what NASA is tracking? Well, they're saying that we have this brown cloud that will get pushed up in their windstorms in Asia and into the jet stream. And within 7 days' time, we will actually deposit some of these air pollutants right here in the western seaboard of the United States. Some are estimating up to 20% of the mercury increase in Alaskan fish stocks is due to Chinese coal burning. Well, okay, what happens in China doesn't stay in China. So we're getting some of that over here. And we're now seeing that the World Health Organization, lots of other organizations are guessing, chemical organizations are guessing that by the year 2050, actually the primary cause of death on the planet is not going to be infectious disease. It's not going to be HIV. It's not going to be things like heart disease and cancer. It's going to be air pollution. Well, it might be contributing to the, as you'll see, heart disease and cancer as well. So we really need to be conscious of the fact that when we burn things, we're changing the air. So much now that the International Agency of Research on Cancer is saying air pollution itself is a type 1 carcinogen. It changes our cells' shape and behavior enough to assist with mutation and the formation of all sorts of cancers, breast cancers, lung cancers, all sorts of uterine cancers, hormone-associated cancers. But it's not just cancer. It's the entire being. We have to think, you and I, we love to be up on hillsides. We love to be viewing gorgeous mountain scenery. We love to be buried in wildflowers and sucking up that amazing oxygen, right? That's our nature. That's what we want. That's what we crave. And when we're living in cities and close to industry and whatnot, we're inhaling all these particles, we're doing all sorts of different changes of signaling. We have an entire system of cells. It's our sixth sense. It's constantly looking at the outside environment. Hey, what is this? What's going on? How am I supposed to react? Right? Our immune system is what it's called. And as it's surveying the outside environment, and it's getting some funky things in the lungs, it's getting some funky things in the nasal passage, it's sending signals directly up to the brain, alert and alarm, something's wrong. The brain changes its behavior, and next thing you know, we're less sharp. We have more incidence of Alzheimer's disease. Our lungs themselves, actually, we increase the stress to the lung, changing the lung tissue, and the immune cells in the lung might see that lung tissue as foreign and start an autoimmune response. In fact, Professor Schoenfeld from Israel, right? I was interviewing him for the Betrayal series on autoimmunity. You know what? He dropped a bomb. And he said, hey, gang, everybody's looking at the intestinal barrier. Everybody's saying the intestinal cells are where the action's at. But I want to tell you, he says, I think a lot of autoimmunity is initiated in the lungs, not the intestines. We're inhaling so many different compounds all the time that the likelihood is we're changing our lung immune system and our lung cell structure so much that that could be initiating the autoimmune response. So all you have to do is look for 2 seconds on PubMed at scientific literature on air pollution and immune cell function, and you'll see we change everything. How we sample things, how we regulate our immune response, how our fat cells respond, how our liver responds, how our muscle responds, how our brain responds. All of these things are supposed to regulate everything. Your hormonal function, your energy production, your ability to break apart foods and utilize them for fuel and not store that fuel as fat. So is it any wonder then, if you start interlaying charts of places that have higher air pollution, you'll see an increased rate of disease. The chart we're looking on the left-hand side is actually obesity. And if you look at those regions that are hot spots, is it any wonder then we have these increasing rates of obesity? Because in essence, what are we doing when we're inhaling particulate matter? There's one activity that human beings can do to increase the rates of cancer, to increase the rates of diabetes and obesity and everything that you can think of. It's called smoking. But what is smoking? Smoking is, in essence, controlled voluntary air pollution. So when you look at the data, when you look at what's going on in modern society as we're burning more fuels, as we're driving more cars, as we're doing more and more of these things, is we're now all smoking. We're increasing our rates of disease along as if we were all increasing our consumption of cigarettes on a daily basis. All right. What does this do? Well, we can't keep our immune system calm in our lungs. We will actually end up with more asthma. We can't stop cells from being misshapen that might get then mistaken by our immune system as foreign invaders. So we might start launching attacks against our own cells, leading to something called rheumatoid arthritis. We might end up having way too much oxidative stress. We might start robbing all the substances in our cells that stabilize their function. They're called antioxidants. So what happens when we're having to combat all these foreign particles all the time is we're having to neutralize the damage that they do, and we're having to pull those things out of our system. When we neutralize them and pull things out of the system, anything that we pull out of the system with gets discarded in the toilet. So what I'm saying is the more oxidative stress, the more pollution that you're exposed to, the more you destabilize cellular function and you require more antioxidants. The primary antioxidant in the human body is something called glutathione. It's made up of 3 amino acids, and you will bind so many toxins with glutathione. You will calm down so many free radicals or unstable toxins in your body through glutathione. And when we look at the data, we see that PM, particulate matter, 2.5, so air pollution, will actually create more heart attacks because it robs your antioxidants. So there's a direct correlation between air quality and heart attacks. The worse the air quality, the more the heart attacks. You can see a direct linear correlation. And this is not something new. We've known this for a long period of time. If you have any sort of insult to a specific person, whether it's air pollution or use of Tylenol or inhaled toxins from pesticides, you'll see that glutathione levels go down. Here's air pollution right here, saying traffic emissions. When you're getting some of the exhaust coming from traffic, we can watch the more exhaust you get, the less glutathione you'll have in your cells. The body's too busy trying to grab onto that stuff, get it out, grab onto that stuff, get it out, neutralize some of the damage that's been done. So you start getting rid of the primary thing that stabilizes you on a daily basis. Same thing happens here now when we start looking at disease as a whole. We say, wait a second, if you're robbing antioxidants and you're supposed to have cell stability, and now all of a sudden your cell can't be stable because it's too busy cleaning house all the time. Right? You know how you feel when you have a laundry list of things to do in your house, right? Man, I got the laundry to do, I got the dishes to do, right? I got to run out and take care of the kids. You're under stress. You're not as functional as you'd like to be. You've got a to-do list a mile long. Well, your cell's exactly the same way. If you're giving it an onslaught of things to deal with on a daily basis, then the function of that cell goes down. You're not going to spend as much time looking for viruses and bacteria. You're not going to spend as much time, doing creative things, being the creative person you want to be. You're going to be overwhelmed. Well, the same thing happens here. Look, when you have lower glutathione levels, it's associated with many autoimmune inflammatory diseases, including rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, Crohn's disease, multiple sclerosis, and contact dermatitis. And in fact, what we're seeing is when the glutathione levels are low, you're more susceptible to viral infections. So this is something that I think that people are not paying attention to. I see so many of my colleagues out there saying, oh, it's all about EBV, and oh, you really have to look at the Lyme, and oh, you have to, and these are true facts, yes. But where is this coming from? How come all of a sudden, right here, right now, so many people are suffering from these flare-ups? How come their autoimmune disease is so exacerbated by these viruses now? And it wasn't 5 years ago or 10 years ago. What is happening now? So I'm constantly examining what's going on with the glutathione. In my class, I teach the PPCP about markers. How do you look for glutathione levels? What specific things will increase glutathione? There are specific foods, there are specific supplements. We're going to talk about a brief little overview in just a second. So higher glutathione levels are associated with fewer number of illnesses, okay? Meaning people don't get as sick when they have adequate glutathione. And this is not just bacteriological, this is viral as well. So as your glutathione levels go up in your cell, stability from disease goes up. Viral infections, bacterial infections go down. Morbidity goes down. You have higher glutathione, you're less likely to die from all sorts of different diseases. You can see neurological diseases, neurodegenerative disease like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS, pulmonary disease of the lung, of course, COPD, asthma, immune diseases, HIV, autoimmune disease, cardiovascular disease, hypertension, myocardial infarction. In fact, I have enough data, gang, to prove that cholesterol is way down the line. The things that oxidize the cholesterol, like air pollution, are far more important. Chronic age-related diseases, of course, liver, cystic fibrosis, and aging itself. So this was shown to me by Dr. Sid Baker. Okay, I worked with him at the Autism Research Institute. And Dr. Baker used this slide a lot in explaining things. And he said, look, at the center of life, the center of human health, is the ability for the cell to remain calm. If you rob the cell of that ability, then you end up with autoimmunity. You end up with inflammation. And at the core of that is this glutathione. So what are some of the things that are going to decrease glutathione? Of course, it's air pollution and smoke, but it's also charbroiled meats, which is like air pollution that got burnt onto your meat. Heavy metals, chlorinated water, Tylenol, pesticides, alcohol. If you haven't gone and seen my Facebook Live on Tylenol, I highly recommend it. I'm going to be doing a blog post on that as well. This is another component in your life that's depleting your glutathione stores. How do you increase glutathione? Well, you can actually give the building blocks to make more. Did you know that if you had an acute depletion of glutathione, okay, let's say you took a bunch of Tylenol and you had liver toxicity, liver damage actually, right? Because you depleted your liver's glutathione stores, you would go to an emergency room, and that emergency room would give you something called N-acetylcysteine. It is an amino acid building block to make glutathione. And if you were given enough N-acetylcysteine within 8 hours of that acute toxicity, 90% of people would have complete remission of liver damage because they replenished their glutathione. This is something that's recognized in all medical journals. It's recognized by the World Health Organization. So if you're depleting glutathione by being exposed to air pollution, pesticides, Tylenol, NAC, N-acetylcysteine, is what is recognized to bring that glutathione levels back up. What's the dosing? 500 milligrams twice a day, up to 1,000 milligrams twice a day if you are depleted in glutathione. You can also use glycine, which is a secondary building block. So glutathione is glutamic acid, it is cysteine, and it is glycine. Cysteine is the most important rate-limiting amino acid. So once you start getting that in, you'll see the glutathione levels go up. And for a lot of my clients, who have not been doing N-acetylcysteine, it's fabulous to see what can happen. Their brain function gets sharp. All of a sudden, their lungs are clearer. If they have cystic fibrosis or if they have asthma, it's fantastic. Glycine is secondary to that. And that's especially if you're living in a new house, you're exposed to paints and solvents, things like that. Glycine will be often very low in those people. And you can recommend 2,000 milligrams a day. So that's 2 caps in the morning, 2 caps in the evening. But if you have sleep problems, you can get up to 3 grams. So that's 6 caps in the evening, and it helps with sleep. And then, of course, glutamine, if you are not doing well, if you're low in body weight, oftentimes people can't make glutathione because they don't have enough aminos to do that. So if you have poor gastric acid, celiac disease, some sort of malnourishment disorder, you might need all 3 of those amino acids. Now, you can also induce the enzymes, we're about to talk about this, that help you make more glutathione. And those are induced by primarily sulforaphane. Don't worry, we're going to get into that in just a second. But it can also be induced by something called alpha lipoic acid. So I'll give you some suggestions on that. And those are the enzymes there, the GST, GGT, the gamma glutamyl transferase, the glutathionase transferase, all these things that actually help you build more glutathione. And then you can provide the nutrient cofactors that are necessary for this entire process. So that's always your B vitamins, that's your magnesium. All right, so here's a list of supplements that I recommend for people who are ramping up their glutathione, right? You've got that N-acetylcysteine. I use the R-lipoic acid, which is a form of alpha-lipoic acid that's far more effective. Sulforaphane, which is cruciferous veggies. We'll talk about that in a second. And or sulforaphane supplementation. And then making sure you have adequate vitamin D. There's some interesting studies showing that having adequate vitamin D actually lowers inflammation and therefore preserves your glutathione stores. Vitamin C, of course, is a very potent antioxidant. And there's the magnesium in some of those B vitamins. So if you are keeping all these things relatively high, it's difficult for you to reach a stage of low glutathione. If you don't have any of these things in your life right now, and you have alcohol, and you have Tylenol, and you have air pollution, chances are when you start supplementing with some of these things, you're going to feel like a different human being. Now, I keep mentioning sulforaphane. Why do I keep doing that? Well, it's cheap. In my case, it's free. And it's probably one of the most effective things you can do for air pollution. I'm not even joking. So when I was doing my TED Talk, right, I interviewed Johns Hopkins researchers, right? Jed Fahey from Johns Hopkins. He's part of the original team that looked at sulforaphane coming in line in 1996. And what they found was they could go to some of the most polluted places on the earth, and they could give people watercress beverages. They could give people broccoli sprout beverages. And when they gave them beverages, broken down vegetables that contained sulforaphane in them, they could increase the excretion of air pollutants, some of the nastiest benzene compounds, by 61%. Well, what am I saying here? I'm saying you can go out up in the mountains like I just did, and you can get overwhelmed. You can come back with a headache. You can come back with your lungs burning. You can come back totally fatigued. Run to your garden, grab some bittercress, grab some arugula, grab some cabbage, grab some kale. You can eat it raw. You can lightly steam it. You can eat some N-acetylcysteine, and what's going to happen is your entire cells are going to shift function. They're going to completely alter their behavior. I'll show you how in just a second. Another study, this is from Bob Roundtree, showing oxidative stress coming from inflammatory cytokines in the lung interacting with air pollutants will completely shift in the presence of broccoli sprouts. So by consuming broccoli sprouts, you can actually protect your airways from damage and reduce asthma incidence. This is a fascinating thing in nature. This came from us being exposed to all sorts of different toxins after volcanic eruptions. We would have these sulfur compounds that would come into our system. They would stimulate our cells to produce more antioxidants. Now, whenever we eat these sulfur compounds, our bodies have been trained to ramp up the detoxification and redox capacity of every cell, meaning you will produce more antioxidants. You will detoxify toxins more readily when you are exposed to these sulfur-based compounds. So I did a TED Talk on this. You're welcome to check that out, DNA Whisperer, broccoli. And basically, I break it down where I say, look, gang, this is your medicine. In the year 2017, I don't care what we're talking about. And I talk about all these toxins in my progressive practitioner coaching program. I'll talk about arsenic. I will talk about BPA and phthalates, the plasticizing agents. I'll talk about organophosphate pesticides. Every one of the things that you're exposed to that causes oxidative stress, every one of those things that needs to be grabbed onto and pulled out of the human body, you'll come back to one family of vegetables being able to increase your ability to tolerate life in the year 2017. And it's the cruciferous vegetables. So you're familiar with all these things. There's arugula on the left-hand side, Brussels sprouts, and maybe you're not familiar with this little thing in the right-hand corner. That's what I just showed you here. This is called cardamine oligosperma or flexuosa or pennsylvanica, depending on where you're growing. But it's a wild mustard. It's a bittercress. And this bittercress is really high in sulforaphane. So I can walk out to my garden in the springtime and fall time after the rains, and I can see this stuff growing everywhere. I can go into the woods and I can see it growing on the side of the trail. It's free. You know what I did? I had some clients of mine, right? I used to see a lot of autistic kids when I worked for the Autism Research Institute and lectured for them. And my gosh, I would take the moms out and we'd take a little hike by a river. My old office was right by a river. And I would walk down and I would say, hey, Mom, look at this. There's this beautiful plant here. Let's go ahead and start eating some of this plant. And so we'd eat, we continue eating it, make sure it's a clean area and whatnot. And then, over time, when we're out there long enough talking and eating, the child would get curious, right? So we'd have a little autistic boy most often who would go down and start picking at these weeds. And they'd start eating the weeds. I'd say, okay, Mom, here are the spots around town. I want you to go to these different places. And I do this to all sorts of moms, right? And they would call me up and they'd say, oh my gosh, I'm getting more eye contact. We're getting verbal now. We're having all sorts of progress because all we're doing is eating this wild bittercress. I don't want you to underestimate the power of these things. These are really cell modulating substances. They actually go in and talk to your cells and change their behavior. You have these biohazards, these toxins coming in, and they're damaging your tissue inside the cell itself. Sulforaphane will come along, and in the presence of sulforaphane, you'll actually bind to a little protein in your cell that releases a magical compound called NRF2. This NRF2 will go in, talk to your DNA, and will say, hey, we need more antioxidant proteins. We need more detoxification proteins. And when it does this, all of a sudden, you will start regulating the damage and you'll start pulling the toxins out. If the damage is made better and the toxins are gone, you now have a stable cell. So isn't it any wonder now that we're seeing research studies on, you name it, depression, Alzheimer's, ADD, ADHD, autism, you name the disease, diabetes just came out, is being benefited by people consuming sulforaphane. So one of my friends, my colleagues, Dr. Terry Wall, right? She does the Wall's protocol. She's eating 9 to 12 servings of vegetables a day. She insists that at least 2 to 3 servings are coming from the sulfur-based cruciferous vegetable family. And for good reason. It seems to turn things around more than anything else. So if you leave with one thing, when you're exposed to air pollution, eat more broccoli. When you're exposed to air pollution, consider N-acetylcysteine. Look at some of these lists of supplements. Go ahead, plantsareWise@gmail.com. Shoot me an email. Say, Tom, send me your list of recommended supplements. Plants Are Wise, PLANTSAREWISE, plantsareWise@gmail. Tom, send me your list of recommended supplements for air pollution. And I will go in and I will put you into full script and we'll give you some low cost, direct supplement ideas with the actual dosing if that's what you're interested in. Otherwise, go eat some broccoli. All right, my friends, that's my little overview right now. I think we all can be a little bit more conscious of our fossil fuel consumption. If you can carpool, carpool. If you can use an electric vehicle, awesome. Did you see the new Teslas? Those look amazing. If you can actually call your power company tomorrow and say, hey, do you guys have subsidized clean energy? I pay an extra 5, sometimes 10 if we're using a lot of power, bucks a month, so I can actually get wind and solar energy. So you don't have to use the coal burning energy. You can use wind and solar. It'll make a difference. Every little step counts. Whatever you can do to lower your consumption, your utilization counts.